People were finding adverts in ChatGPT for Peloton and Target, and the internet flipped, absolutely flipped. They're like, well, I'm cancelling my ChatGPT subscription. Good morning, everybody. This is AI with Kyle. We're going to be running through the daily news and updates from the world of artificial intelligence, as well as answering live questions from the audience coming in from the private community on Circle, which is free to join, from Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Hello to everybody tuning in. These videos will be available on YouTube after. All information is covered in the newsletter. Make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter. Make sure you're in the community itself where we're discussing what happens in the live, and you can keep up to date with what is going on in the world of AI, because there is a lot of it. This week, we are expecting a new ChatGPT model, codenamed Garlic, and probably going to be ChatGPT 5.2, maybe 5.5. We do not know yet, but it is a response to Gemini 3. Last week, Monday, OpenAI, creators of ChatGPT, were put into a code red by Sam Altman, basically said, hey, we need to pull our fingers out and we need to release a model that is going to blow people's socks off. And they paused all of their extra projects, advertising, things like the health assistant, things like Pulse, ChatGPT, were all paused, and all of the focus, all of the manpower, all of the energy is going into making sure the model is better and making people happy, because they have been taking an absolute beating from Google for the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months. That is the big news later this week. It is not here yet. There's a lot of speculation going around. There's a lot of chat. There's a lot of what does this mean for the industry, but we don't know yet. And there's no point speculating that much. So I imagine, and this is speculation, it will probably come out on Thursday. OpenAI tend to do their releases on a Thursday. That's just what they've always done. And I imagine it will be very similar this time, but we'll find out. Maybe I'm wrong. In the meantime, there isn't that much happening in the world of artificial intelligence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover a couple of big stories, two big stories, and then a look at the use of personas and roles inside of prompting. So when you prompt an AI, often you will say something like, you are a lawyer. Now, here is your instructions, and it puts the AI into a certain mode, a certain modality, which allows you to get better results. So Ethan Mollick has done a post saying, hey, actually, this isn't as useful as you think, and that's led to some discussions. We'll get to that, and we'll talk about that, and that will be the main focus of the show. I'm also taking questions from anyone live. I'm not seeing any at the moment, so I'm going to jump into a piece of news which came out yesterday, and I haven't seen many people talking about this. Trump has given Nvidia the green light to sell advanced AI chips to China. Previously, the Trump administration, and even before the Biden administration, had asked for restrictions on Nvidia chips being sold to China, because Nvidia are basically the only game in town when it comes to GPUs, graphical processing units. Given Chinese access to these chips would allow them to accelerate artificial intelligence and dominate. They've been doing well without Nvidia GPUs, to be fair. And what this restriction has meant is China has focused on domestic production, so getting Huawei up and running for GPU construction for machine learning chips, and also making models that are more efficient. So DeepSeek famously was trained on a much smaller number of GPUs than are used in America. Something like the Colossus data center from XAI that has, I believe, 50,000 H200 chips. And each of those is about £30,000, a lot of money, energy, and brute forcing to a better model. China has not had that luxury. There's been a roaring black market trade in getting Nvidia chips to China. Singapore purchases about 30% of all Nvidia's chips, and Singapore is not a big country. So there's either cloud training data centers that are working for mainland, or those chips are being ported up to the mainland. That's speculation. I don't want to be libelous here or cause a scandal, but they're buying a lot of chips. Now, however, it looks like Trump and the US are relaxing restrictions. US President Donald Trump announced he will allow AI chip giant Nvidia to sell its advanced H200 chips to approved customers in China. The H200 are the workhorse when it comes to GPUs. There are other ones like the H100 created to sell to China, but it looks like the H200s are going to be allowed for direct sale. We will protect national security, create American jobs, and keep America's lead in AI. Part of the reason for not selling the chips to China was national security. They actually have the AI, what's it called? The US AI bill. Let me see if I can find it. I've forgotten the name of it entirely, but it came out back in June or July, where Trump And the White House said that this is a strategic issue and we need to control our supply chains. We need to control AI dominance as a counter to China. This seems to be going the other way. So the decision will apply to other chip companies like AMD and come after extensive lobbying by Nvidia boss Jensen Huang. Nvidia, both the world's leading chip firm and most valuable company, they hit $5 trillion briefly. I think they're just below at the moment, has found itself at the center of a geopolitical tug of war between the US and China and has been banned from selling its most advanced chips, H200s, to Beijing. Trump reversed the chip selling ban in July, but demanded that Nvidia pay 15% of its Chinese revenues to the US government. I covered this previously back in July. This is not a tariff. This is not a normal kind of duty or on imports and exports. This is a revenue share. Unprecedented for a government to say, we want a revenue share in your sales. That's wild. And basically, both myself and a lot of people at the time were saying that's basically a bribe, cash to allow us to sell to China. What was really interesting at the time, though, is that this was announced. We're going to let our American chips be sold to China. Aren't you lucky? And we're going to collect 15% of the revenue. Beijing responded with, no, we don't want any, which was an absolute power move. Nvidia is stuck between selling to China, which will give them a huge market. It will open up the market and allow them to become even more dominant, larger, and have more customers. America and Trump wanting to keep the technology for American companies. It is not helped by the fact that this is all tied up to Taiwan as well, which increases the geopolitical complexity of this, as you can imagine. But this is a huge piece of news which I haven't seen many people covering. So here we go. Offering H200s to approved commercial customers vetted by the Department of Commerce strikes a thoughtful balance that is great for America, Nvidia said in its statement. The company's shares rose slightly on the news. Trump said 25% will be paid to US states in his post. The 25% rather than the 15% of revenues that was agreed upon before. So it sounds like Nvidia has cut an even larger deal with the American government for 25% of their revenue, a huge amount, going straight to the government. This revenue share has grown from 15% to 25%. I imagine we're going to see a lot more chatter about this. As I say, it's flown under the radar, but this is potentially one of the biggest pieces of news of the year. I just haven't seen many people talking about it. But this allows China to have access to H200s, which they're getting at the moment through the black market or through less than legal channels. Now they'll be able to open it up. There's this thing about, we're only going to sell to, what do they call them? Approved customers. But as you can imagine, the approved customers can buy a lot of H200 chips and sell them on to non-approved customers. That doesn't really matter. Hacked by Blog saying Taiwan is way too close to China. How on earth is that supposed to work? Yeah, unfortunately, Taiwan is wrapped up in all of this. So that does really make this a bit of a tinderbox, unfortunately. The other big piece of news from The Hollywood Reporter, which I don't normally put into my stories, but I thought this was worthwhile discussing. So Netflix are in the process of acquiring Warner Brothers. That by itself is an absolutely huge piece of news. That is an old school film studio being purchased by a streaming service, a company that used to send out DVDs that destroyed Blockbuster and then became an absolute giant of a company by streaming media. The Hollywood Reporter is pointing out something a lot of people have missed. Other reason to buy the Warner Brothers library is that it is an asset, it's a data asset for training artificial intelligence. We know that Netflix are experimenting with dipping their toes into the water of AI, but to do so requires having a huge library of content, being able to put in all these characters that have intellectual property attached to them, being able to train on all these episodes and all of these films, and then releasing artificial intelligence versions of these episodes, of these films. This might be part of the play for Netflix because they need larger libraries of content that they actually own. A lot of the stuff on Netflix that is not produced by Netflix directly they wouldn't be allowed to train on it because they don't necessarily have the rights. If they purchase a whole studio, they suddenly have the rights to train on and to produce derivative works from the Warner Brothers library, which is huge. A key asset Netflix could be eyeing in the deals is one few people are talking about, an AI trove. Among the most important aspects of the coming automated age, say forward-looking insiders, whatever that means, is a rich well of content going back many decades, either to train your own studio on or to give consumers to play with. Oh, that's a really good point. Being able to create versions, like personalized versions of shows, and giving people access to the tools to do that is something you can do if you own the IP rights. Warner Brothers has it, Netflix doesn't, and if the deal goes through, the streamer will. Netflix executives on an investor call Friday announced a lucrative deal. Co-chief executive Ted Sarandos just said innovation several times, while he and others alluded to world building, an AI concept. Since technology relies on a massive library, Netflix's AI efforts got a big boost. So this is speculative. This doesn't necessarily exist, but I think this is a part of the deal that we do need to be paying attention to as well. However, we don't know if this is going through because there is now another bid coming from Paramount. I believe it's Paramount. That only just came in yesterday. So it might not be Netflix purchasing it. It might be another company. You hop over to this. Why don't you talk about Copilot? Due to the security situation, it'd be great to hear more about their capabilities of progression. The main reason I don't talk about Copilot that much is that it's not very good. Copilot is built upon ChatGPT, because Microsoft now own 27% of OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT. So you have the Microsoft servers at the bottom, the Azure servers, the ChatGPT model on top, and Copilot, a reskinned version of ChatGPT. As of about a month ago, however, Copilot can now use Claude. So they struck a deal with Anthropic. And Claude is, I believe, better than ChatGPT. However, in both cases, Microsoft, in their reskinning, in their reformulation, their fine-tuning of ChatGPT, they seem to have stripped out some of its capabilities. So whenever I talk to people from my personal tests, we all find that Copilot is just not as able and not as capable as ChatGPT, has more functionality and features. The main benefit of Copilot is the security, the fact that it's built into Microsoft 365 Office, the 365 Microsoft Office, whatever it's called, and the fact that in certain enterprises, that is all you can use. So I used to do trainings for Copilot as well, and I've actually stopped doing them because so many of the trainings were either people who thought AI wasn't very good because their only exposure to it had been through Copilot, which isn't very good, or people who had used other AIs like ChatGPT and they'd used Claude, and they were annoyed that they had to use Copilot at work. A lot of them were using ChatGPT on the side because Copilot wasn't very good. That said, I think Copilot's in a really good position. Microsoft are in a really good position to make something of it because of their ecosystem. So this is, let me pull up the Microsoft 365 Copilot. The diagram, the promise of it is really cool. Here it is. I love this idea. The potential for Copilot is to sit at the core of an organization, surrounded by all of these other applications, all of these other elements from the Microsoft ecosystem, all of which talking to this central Copilot, to this central artificial intelligence. That's a really exciting idea. However, in reality, at least for now, and it's only been a couple of years, the reality is all of these edge uses, Visual Studio, Power BI, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, OneNote, SharePoint, Shopping, all have their own AIs, none of which are very good. You end up with 50 different implementations of Copilot. None are leading in technology. For example, PowerPoint slide generation using AI is terrible compared to Gamma. Gamma is a specialized slide generating tool. It's terrible compared to Notebook LM, which now has the ability to generate slides. A lot of the pieces of the Microsoft ecosystem, they're just not very well implemented. So the promise is huge. The idea of having AI that works across the whole organization, it builds up this corpus of knowledge, is really exciting. But practical implementation of it so far it leaves a lot to be desired. So that's why I don't tend to talk about Copilot much. It's not cutting edge. The only people who use it tend to be people who have to because of the organization and the enterprise. But I think there's a huge amount I have optimism for this ecosystem as a whole. Microsoft just needs time to pull it off. Copilot is struggling in the market. Yeah, Copilot has an advantage here because a lot of organizations, a lot of enterprises use the Microsoft ecosystem already. So it has a built-in distribution in the same way that lots of enterprises use Google Workspace. So that means Gemini has immediate distribution into those ecosystems. But I've met organizations who are now toying with the idea of moving away from Microsoft because the AI implementation is so weak. Obviously, moving off an ecosystem, moving from Microsoft to Google or from Google to Microsoft or to one of the other alternatives is a huge decision. But the fact that they're even thinking about it because of the AI implementation that Microsoft has is quite telling. Moving your enterprise from one provider to another at that scale is, I'd rather just start a new company at that point. It's such a big job. How are you so informed? What job do you have? I don't have a job. I haven't had a job since I was 18. I've always run my own businesses. My first business when I was 11 was selling pirate video games, but don't tell anyone about that. But I've always had my own businesses. My first proper job was I set up a TV station in Vietnam when I was 20 something. And then since then, I've had a digital marketing agency, I've had multiple online businesses, and now I've pivoted more into the world of artificial intelligence. I've never had a job. I've always run my own businesses. 3 years ago, when the first big public release of ChatGPT came out, I remember looking at it, playing around with it, like a lot of us did in that first week, and thinking, it's not very good yet, but I can see this being a threat to my digital marketing business a year from now. So I started reading and writing as much as I could. I started a newsletter. I've written over 500,000 words on the use of artificial intelligence for business specifically. If you go into my website, there's multiple courses and a catalog of playbooks. These playbooks, Create a Business, SEO Micro Tools, AI Training for Businesses, AI Fundamentals, these were written in my newsletter. And this one here is 15,000 words. That was 5 newsletter issues, each about 3,000 words. A huge amount of content. Over the last couple of years, I've written about AI, and that's how I've managed to build up a knowledge base. That said, I am an interested amateur between artificial intelligence and online business and entrepreneurship. I am not an AI expert. I have an interest in and I understand some concepts of machine learning, but I don't have a PhD or computer science degree or anything like that. So I am, like a lot of us, working this out as I go along. I think it's an exciting time because it is a new technology and humanity's working out what to do with it. When I say new technology, generative AI in its current state. I'm not going to get into details, there's too much there. Marius says, hi Kyle, I'm a developer. Can you talk about marketing, vibe marketing, through the lens of a developer? I'm a marketer, actually. I basically love building products, but I suck at getting people to find my products, thanks. So this is a huge problem now because we have tools like Lovable. We have the ability to build so much, and I'm building more than ever. The market is oversupplied. If you go to an AI tool directory, it's just full of projects, very similar projects, a lot of them as well, a lot of which have just gone to die because the marketing has not been worked out. Marketing and distribution is what matters. Greg Eisenberg on Twitter talks about this, saying building is the easy part. Anyone can get their idea and they can build a minimum viability product or a proof of concept. Will it be perfect? No, but it's enough to get it out to market. So what this means is the difficulty is not the building element. The difficulty is now, how the hell do I get people to use what it is I've built? And that's going to get harder and harder as it becomes easier and easier to build. More people are going to enter the market. How to do it? I highly recommend building in public. Look at someone like Jack Friks. This is his website, jackfriks.com. He's built a few applications, Postbridge, a social media scheduler, and Lovely, which he built it for his fiance. He's launched it and talks about everything openly. Follow him on Twitter, talk about your process, building, and start marketing before you have a product. This is his new one. He talks very openly about money, marketing. He talks about what he's building. He talks about the journey. And what that has allowed him to do is to build up this following. He's got 67,000 people here. These people are interested in whatever he builds. He's got 2 products at the moment, Postbridge and Lovely. He will pivot into something else in the future. People are following him for him and are now in his orbit. When he has an idea, he can go online and say, I'm thinking about this idea, what do people think? Very quickly, that allows you to verify whether the idea is worth pursuing or not. I don't know about you, but you probably have lots of ideas every single day. And the question is now, oh God, which one should I build? Because we can build them all now because we have these tools at our disposal. Where should we focus? If you have an audience, you can go to them beforehand, before you build a single thing and you say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Is this something that you would be interested in? And very quickly, if there's an appetite for it. I've done this myself. I have an audience of about 250,000. At the beginning of 2024, I put out a tweet, a message on TikTok, and in my newsletter saying I give workshops to businesses. When I go and give a workshop to a business teaching them about artificial intelligence, I get paid about £1,000 an hour. I'm thinking about packaging up my materials and teaching other people how to go and give my workshops to companies so you can charge $1,000, £1,000 an hour. Would people be interested? And I had hundreds of people say, yeah, that sounds really cool. That tells me this is something I should pursue. Me and my business partner built a product, pre-launched it, did an early bird, and built it on the fly with the first cohort coming through. And we could do all of that because we already have an audience in place. So any product that you're building, any business that you're building, you need to think about that audience and you need to think about distribution from day one. I've written a course called the 10-week AI Summer Camp. It's not summer anymore, but you can still do it. The first part is your first niche, working out your basic business idea. The second part is start to build it in public and start to talk about what it is you're building. And then the third part is refining your idea. Then it goes into building, marketing, etc., etc. But literally the second part is you need to document this, talk about this, show people what you are working on, and start to build up that audience as soon as possible so you can test ideas. When it comes to launch, you have people you can sell to. Otherwise, it's really hard. Marketing basically breaks down to you either build an audience using content, doing live streams like this, videos, etc. You buy an audience, that is advertising. That is fine if you have cash, but you need capital to do that. Or you borrow an audience. You talk to other people who have an audience and you say, hey, this is what I built. Do you want to promote it for me? And we split the money 50-50 or whatever it is. Those are your three options. And if you don't have cash, if you do not have capital, then buying an audience is difficult. If you do not have connections, then and you don't have a reputation in your industry, then borrowing an audience is difficult. The best thing you can do is build your own audience and you start that ASAP. The best way is pick this up and shoot videos. So TikTok and Instagram. Doing short videos, learning how to talk to camera, learning how to explain what you're doing, what you're working on in 30 seconds is powerful. There's a guy called Yoni, great example. He has 189,000 followers. He's done one video per day, every day for a year and a half. He started before he had a product. This is his product, BrainRot, which he launched a year into this experiment. But he's a great example of picking up the camera, the first few days being like, I don't know what I'm doing. That's fine. These videos are rubbish. I want to build something with AI. No idea what it is, but I will build something. And then he just kept doing it for now 500 days. And he's going to keep on going. Let's see, his 2025 goals were $1 million of revenue, $1,000 monthly recurring revenue, owned 3 properties, 100k followers across all platforms. He's definitely done that. Read 12 books and 265 bench press. I'm assuming that's pounds. Must be. Unless he's an absolute beast. So yeah, my advice is to build your audience first, regardless of your product, to build it around you and your journey. You will build lots of different products and they will not all hit. Whatever you build, you have that built-in audience so that you can go to them and say, hey, this is what I have. I thought you were like 25. I'm in my late 30s. I started that TV station years ago when I was 21. But that would have been, God, I don't know, decades ago. Cool. So I want to have a look at, let me check other questions quickly because I've been blethering. But thank you, Marius. No, thank you. There's not much AI news today. So a question like that is great and useful to me. If Marius, hop into the community. You're watching on YouTube right now. If you go to AI with Kyle, then join community. We have a community and we're talking about these questions in there. Come and ask that question and I will continue to talk at you. This is my job. I don't mind. Tari said, did my question come through? Let me check. I need to scroll back. I did not see it. I said you said you're a lecturer, but I didn't see your question. He says, I'm a lecturer. That's all I see. Maybe send it again? Yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, Marius, come to AI with Kyle, join the community and say hi, say, hey, it's me. And so I know it's you. That's where we're continuing these discussions because it's a big question. It's a big question a lot of people have. Say, hey, I built something. Now what? The actual hard part of the business is working out how to sell it to, who to sell it. So I wanted to look at, get rid of this. So Ethan Mollick, who you should all follow, he's fantastic. He's a writer. He wrote Co-Intelligence. He's a professor at Wharton, I believe it is, and just a very smart guy talking about the the kind of impacts of artificial intelligence on us as humans and how we're going to work with it, how we're going to live with AI tested. One of the most common prompting techniques, giving the AI a persona to make it more accurate. We found that telling the AI you are a great physicist doesn't make it significantly more accurate at answering physics questions, nor does you are a lawyer make it worse. So they're basically saying that there is no impact of giving it a role, a persona. It does not improve accuracy. They use GPQA and MMLU Pro, gave it various prompts with and without the domain persona. Instead of saying you are a domain expert in law or you are a physicist or whatever, they tested it with and without that to see if there was any impact. And no, there was no impact in the accuracy of the results themselves. So lots of people are reacting, saying, this doesn't stack with my experiences. And people are questioning the methodology. These results are cooked, smaller models. Anthropic and Google publish prompt documentation that provide a persona in the prompt. So if we go to Anthropic's prompt engineering guidelines, they say, give Claude a role. Tell Claude what type of role, what type of persona you want it to take on. So the official advice from Anthropic, from Google, from OpenAI is you should do this. So people are wondering, like, why is this paper from Ethan Mollick showing something else? What I think is happening here is when we give it a role, a persona, we're not necessarily expecting it to give us more accurate answers. We are using that to focus its attention, because an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT can act as, it can role play, it can take on the persona of pretty much anything. That's what makes them amazing. But at the same time, if you don't give it that specificity, if you don't give it some guidelines about this is what I want you to be right now during this question or during this exploration, then it will tend towards the generic. By giving a role, by giving it a persona, we are basically focusing it down on this huge set of possibilities. We're focusing it down to now you are a physicist or a sales copywriter for a web page. That's going to focus everything. The more context we give AI, the better the performance. Mistakes or hallucinations come when we don't give it enough context and it starts to fill in the gaps itself. If we give it a persona, we're closing the space for those gaps to exist in. So interestingly, Claude or Anthropic are saying it does actually increase accuracy. So they're saying in complex scenarios like legal analysis or financial modeling, role prompting can significantly boost Claude's performance. That is the official line. But Ethan is saying, no, that's not what happens. He says, I didn't see them test personas or show they improve accuracy. I know they both use personas at time. I just don't know if they've tested them. So Ethan is saying that maybe Anthropic are just making this up, basically, or at least they don't have evidence for this. But I thought this was a really interesting discussion because this is something that comes up a lot. Should we be using prompt frameworks, personas? The answer is always just try it in different ways, in different chats with the same prompt, but a slightly different structure. So one will have a persona, one will not. See which works better for you. We can do benchmarks until the cows come home. It does not matter if you subjectively find something works better for you and your workflow and what you are using artificial intelligence for. That is the same for all these benchmarks. They are fascinating to see. They're great for marketing. But ultimately, what matters is your usage of the AI. And if you find adding a persona, adding a role leads to a better prompt, do it. Do it. Whatever works for you. I wanted to flag it because it's an interesting debate. It's a good chance to show you the Claude, the Claude prompt engineering overview. This gets quite heavy because it is like proper prompt engineering for when you're building software, but this is still very useful, a reference guide. And all main models have this. Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude all have documentation telling you how best to prompt them. With all of them, though, it's about communicating. If you can communicate clearly what it is you want, provide any additional context that is required, express the instructions step by step, then you're going to get better results from AI. Generative AI is so exciting is because it's a communication skill. It's not a pure technical skill. It's about the ability to get something from your head and get it out into the AI, which if you studied humanities or you're a leader or a writer or a speaker, is really exciting. It's not just about code anymore. Advertising in Gen AI, what do you think? I think it would be a disaster if it happens. It's going to happen. They need to make money. We have to look at the Google revenue breakdown. Google right now are in an existential crisis because all of their money, you can see Google Search and other is 56 or 57% of revenue. Google Network is 10%. So that's about 70% of their revenue from advertising. Same with Meta. Meta and social media companies and Google are advertising companies. They're not tech companies. Google makes 10% of their revenue from Google Cloud, 10% from Google Ads, more advertising. So 70, 80% of their revenue is ads. And then they have some subscriptions. They have some licensing fees from Samsung for Android, but that's tiny compared to their cash from advertising. Exactly the same for Meta. Facebook and Instagram are advertising platforms first and foremost, not technology companies. These companies need to replace that revenue, especially Google. As people stop using search and use generative AI instead to access information, Google's revenues will collapse. Google needs to cannibalize their own revenues from search advertising. They need to cannibalize their own cash cow because this will disappear over the next decade. They need to release AI tools which are killing themselves existentially, but they are the next generation of how we access information. They need to work out how to monetize that by charging subscriptions. That's what all the AI companies are doing right now. So it's $20 or $200 a month. You can make money from that. The amount of money required, though, is huge. And somebody did the mathematics on ChatGPT, and to break even, they're going to have to get their subscriptions up to Netflix level. They need to become pretty much endemic globally with everybody using and paying for ChatGPT for them to be able to afford their burn rate. That's not going to happen for years, if at all. The most obvious way for them to make money is advertising. They have a huge amount of personalized data on us. They know more than Google search could ever know about us. They have a rich tapestry of what we do, what we're interested in, our ailments, depending on how much information you put in. Hell, some people have hooked their email accounts into their AIs. They've hooked their documentation into AI. That is all there for the taking in terms of advertising information. The amount of money they can make by inserting dynamic personalized adverts into our AI results is so tantalizingly huge that I can't imagine any of them are going to ignore it. What I think is going to happen, though, is nobody wants to be first. ChatGPT, it was last week, people were finding adverts in ChatGPT for Peloton and Target, and the internet flipped. Absolutely flipped. They're like, I'm cancelling my ChatGPT subscription, and I hate this, and I'm moving to Gemini, etc. That is the risk. Whoever goes first is going to have to take all of that hatred, and they will potentially demolish their own model. Yahoo, this happened to Yahoo back in the 90s, early 2000s. Yahoo got greedy with their advertising, and they started to serve up adverts at the top of Yahoo search that were not declared as adverts. You could buy an advert and it would just look like an organic listing. When people found out, Yahoo lost their reputation, basically, and people shifted over to Google because Google, we're not going to do any of that. We're never going to engage in those shenanigans. We'll make sure you know it's an advert. Yahoo tanked and Google ascended. Something similar could happen to whoever introduces adverts into their AI first. It's probably still going to be ChatGPT, though, because OpenAI need to make money. They are hemorrhaging money, and Sam Altman has to keep going back to the investors and saying, hey, I need another $200 billion. This is awkward, but I need $500 billion, please. Google don't have to do that. Google have search, and they're going to continue to make search revenues. They have cash reserves. They own their vertical, their own TPUs, so they don't buy from Nvidia. They own the cloud, training their models, hosting their models, inference. They own the application layer. So I'm currently viewing this through Google Chrome, as are most people. Most people are using Chrome around the world. It's about 70%. They have Android, has 70% penetration as well on the mobile markets. And in terms of search traffic and search volume, I think about 60, 70% goes through Google. Google can't afford to wait for ChatGPT again. You betrayed my trust. I can't believe you're using my information to train, to serve me adverts. What the hell is this? People will get furious, leave ChatGPT in droves, cancel their subscriptions, especially if they put ads in paid subscriptions, move over to Gemini, move to Claude, move to wherever, it doesn't really matter, as long as they're off ChatGPT. And then 5 years down the line, a couple of years down the line, Google can start to introduce sponsored listings, adverts, banner ads, AI overviews that push you in a certain direction directly into their ecosystem. And they will not bear the brunt of the anger in the same way that OpenAI does. If I was a Google, that's what I would be doing. I would be sitting and waiting for OpenAI to basically choke themselves out by having to introduce adverts early, by making everyone angry, by absolutely tanking yourselves, and then Google can, a couple of years down the line, when it's all settled down, introduce adverts and replace this Google search revenue. I think this is not a question of if, it is a question of when, and all be having very detailed discussions about when they can introduce adverts without it murdering their service offer. I expect we're going to see it in 2026, definitely, and I think ChatGPT will be the first. Cancelled by YouTube says, must admit, I see an advert, I ban them in my head. Yeah, but OpenAI need to make some money. They're in a difficult position, raising money to keep the lights on and to keep training the best models on Earth. But there is no way for them to reach profitability at the moment. And the amount of money they are raising, the amount of money they are spending is so gargantuan that eventually the market, or it already is, the market's going to be like, hang on, how are you going to make a return? What's your business model? What is your return on investment? And it's going to be advertising. So they're going to have to launch it at some point, and it's going to be a rough week for them. In my opinion, we shouldn't shun OpenAI or any other model to do advertising. If we let Google starve the competition, it's bad for innovation. Yes, 100%. I have Google shares, so if you want to pump it, go ahead. But for the broader environment, it's better to keep the competition. 100%. Competition's good. Unfortunately, Google they already own monopolies in search. In mobiles, I know 30% or 25% is Apple, iOS, but they're 70%. So globally, they have an Android monopoly. That's less of a strong one. And Chrome, they have a monopoly, about 70%. They're always being investigated by Antitrust. I think there was a new one, the new antitrust suit against Google. EU opens antitrust inquiry over Google's AI search summaries. This is always being leveled at Google, and for good reason. They are dominant in many markets. That the Google lawyers are sitting pretty, let's put it that way. They're always fighting antitrust suits. We've opened an investigation into potential anti-competitive conduct by Google. The investigation will assess, the investigation will assess whether Google has breached EU competition rules by using web publishers' content for artificial intelligence, for scraping websites, which we know they do already because that's how they index for Google search. It's based on crawlers that look at information. So it looks like the EU are going to be investigating them for using that same information, that crawled information, to train Gemini, which serves AI summaries. At the top, you now have an AI overview. It's putting Gemini 3 right at the top of the search page. Yes, they definitely did this. The question is whether or not this is legal or not. So that's going to be another interesting lawsuit for Google. This is just a cost of doing business when you are Google. I agree with you, Chris, that competition is good. That's why AI is exciting, is because we have Google, we have OpenAI, we have Anthropic, and we have XAI to a certain extent. And every month or so, we have a new best model, and it cycles, and they're all competing. And then we have China on the other side, we have DeepSeek, Qwen, Kimi, who are putting out really strong models too. It's fantastic for us as consumers because we keep getting better models. I agree, it would suck if Google chokeholds the market, buys Anthropic, and owns AI. That would not be good for the consumers, and it would be terrible for competition, because the amount of money needed to train these models is immensely high. You need hundreds of billions, if not trillions, to build and market these models. It just requires obscene amounts of money, which is why there's only realistically 10 AI companies who are building frontier level models, including China. Very few. Awesome. It's been about an hour. Considering there hasn't been much news, not bad. Thank you, Marius, for your question in particular, which allowed me to talk for 15 minutes about marketing. Again, all of this is going to be available on YouTube. Make sure you are subscribed. We are at, I like to check this every day, I'm not obsessed, we are at 10,700 subscribers. So we're doing pretty great. And make sure you subscribe for the newsletter as well. So the newsletter is totally free, and it gives you a summary of what was covered in the live. If I talk about paper, for example, like this one here, I will give you a link. I'm also creating more infographics like this one. So yeah, make sure you are subscribed to that, totally free. As well as that, there is a community. We have launched it over the weekend, and you can join that on aiwithkyle.com, and that will give you access to the newsletter and community. Watch the live, read the newsletter, you can watch the videos, and then we discuss them inside of the community. So it all comes together, and it's a good way to keep up to date with what the hell is going on in AI, because it's a lot. Cool. Make sure you're subscribed, totally free. There's also a free challenge, Getting AI Ready in 5 Days, a free challenge which is available here, as well as a bunch of courses, a catalog that's absolutely full of playbooks, and honestly, more than you could ever need. We're currently working on helping people to work their way through this material, which is a problem because there is just so much of it. It's all available for free, and I hope a useful learning resource for you.